Happy New Year, everybody. Show me your glory. That's the title of the message, and the subject will be focusing on the presence of God. Welcome, first-time viewers, regular supporters, dignitaries, saints, and friends. I am your host, and my name is Keturah. And today on the program, we're going to spend the remaining minutes together looking at the book of Exodus and chapter 33, verses 1 through 23. Now, I am focusing on the presence of God for this new year. We spent a lot of time during the feast season festival celebrations of Rosh Hashanah, and we meditated on the 7 blessings of God when He promised in Exodus chapter 23 and verses 20, when He told them that if they would honor His most holy day, His feast celebration, and call it a delight, He promised that He would send a ministering angel that would go before them to prepare the way that they should take. He promised that the ministering angel would lead and guide them into the place it is that He has prepared. He promised that they would be recompensed for obedience to this voice of the ministering angel, to be aware of His presence, for He would not pardon their transgressions. And He told them that He was going to give them an inheritance, a heritage, that He would take them in among the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and the Hittites, and that He would drive them out from before them. But while they were in the midst of those ungodly people, they were not to partake of their practices or their lifestyles, but they were to tear down their images and pagan practices. And He said that if they would get involved with the paganism in the land in that day, that they would risk being turned from their beliefs in following God to following ungodliness. And wherever you see the word "ite" in the scriptures, know that that's a type of sin. So they were going in to possess the land in an area that was laced with sin and pagan practices. But they were commanded to conduct themselves in a godly manner and to keep in strict consecration and fellowship with God. And He told them that He would bless their bread and their water. He said that there would be no barren among you. He said He would take out sickness and disease from the midst. He said there would be no miscarriages, no early deaths. And He promised to fulfill the number of your days, meaning you will live a long life. That's what He promised, and that He would increase you little by little. And He gave them that directive so that when they would go in to possess the new land, a new beginning, they would have an understanding how to conduct themselves while there. And they would not be able to obtain possession right away, and that they were not to be in a hurry. He said, I would bless you to take the wealth transference, take the land little by little, lest the beasts of the field would come down against you. In other words, he was telling them to take it slow, learn how things operate so that they would not be driven out and that the land would not be barren. Remember, these people, they were slaves. They didn't know how to govern or do anything. And so I shared all of that information with you at the top of the lesson for your understanding of just where it is that I am going with you here today in my talk on the subject of the presence of God. The title of the lesson is Show Me Your Glory. And so those were the 7 blessings that God promised to his people. And so make that your own, especially those of you who took the time to follow me in October, September on last year when we celebrated Rosh Hashanah, the new year. We rang in the new year of 2016 early. Nonetheless, the blessings are still yours. God's word is still yours. And I want you to make it personal and apply it to your life as we go into the new year. Embrace the 7 promises of knowing that the ministering angel will go before you this year and will prepare the way that you are to take, and that ministering angel will not pardon your transgressions, and know that you are to obey his voice. Don't be in a hurry. You may also find yourself in this year among sinful situations and settings, but you are not to compromise your Christian stance, nor turn from serving the Lord your God. And then he promised that he would take barrenness out from the midst of you, so you will then be productive. And he promised that he would take sickness and disease out from the midst of you. And he promised that there would be no loss of life or early deaths. And he said that he would fulfill the number of your years, so that means you will live long in the earth. And he is, and when you go in holding on to those promises, know that you will be increased little by little. It is not going to happen exponentially or right away, but it will happen. You will increase. God has increase on his mind where you are concerned. And so now let's pick up here in the book of Exodus, where God is giving his marching orders to the people, and he's making it known that they will go up. And he said to them, but my presence will not go with you, because you are a stiff-necked people. And that word stiff-necked simply means they were rebellious and they were stubborn, and God refused to dwell or put himself in the midst of a rebellious, stubborn people. But I want to submit to you today that God's presence will go with you into the new year. All you got to do is ask. And we're going to look at asking God for his presence to be with you when you go into this new year. So let's start our reading in the book of Exodus, chapter 33, verses 1. And he says, And I, the Lord, said unto Moses, Depart and go up hence, thou and the people which you have brought up out of the land of Egypt, unto the land which I swear unto Abraham and Isaac your fathers. And in verse 2, and he said, And I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites. This is the same promise that he gave them back in Exodus chapter 23 and 20. And in verse 3, he said, And unto a land flowing with milk and honey is where he is going to take them. For I will go up in, he said, For I will not go up in the midst of you, for you are a stiff-necked people, and lest I consume you in the way. And in verse 4, and he said, When the people heard these evil tidings, they mourned, and no man did put on him his ornaments. They mourned because God was letting them know that he was withdrawing his presence from them, that he would not grace them with his presence. And that's something to mourn about. If you don't have the presence of God, go into the new year seeking God for his presence. And I'm just going to take a little bunny trail here, because these people had a task on their hands. They had some work ahead of them, things that they needed to accomplish and to do to complete the marching orders that was set here in motion by Moses from God. And let me tell you, when you're trying to achieve or do anything for God, you need his presence. That's the ultimate answer for your challenges, people, this day. And I know I got the right mail. When God's presence is there, he will make all things new again. Everything will be at peace. Things will be right. Things will go well. Things will be harmonious. Things will be pleasant, attractive, peaceable, easily to be entreated. So you want to always invite the presence of God into your midst. Least you will have a hard time. The labor will be dry and barren, which is what I spoke to you about earlier in the opening of the text, when he promised them that they would walk in those blessings for observing and celebrating his feast season. In verse 5, and for the Lord had said unto Moses, Say unto the children of Israel, You are a stiff-necked people. I will come up into the midst of you in a moment and consume you there. Now put off your ornaments from thee, that I may know what to do with thee. God was angry with them because of their stubborn, rebellious nature, and he was ready to drop his anger and his wrath. And so in verse 5 in chapter 33 of Exodus, he told them to take off their ornaments from them. In other words, he wanted them to humble themselves, to consecrate themselves until it could be known just what it is that should be done with this type of nature. And let me tell you, if you're going into the new year and you're stubborn and rebellious and uncooperative with God's ministering spirits and his angels, you can expect that it's going to be hard, because when God withdraws his presence, things will be hard. It will be dry. It will be barren. In other words, you won't be productive. You could suffer loss. You could suffer even loss of life, miscarriages. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the miscarriage of a child. But a miscarriage could be an early death or something. Maybe a business could go under prematurely. Anything that's lost prematurely, that's considered a miscarriage. So we're getting in gear for the new year to be blessed and to walk in the promises of God. So let's see how they get through this. And so in verse 7, and Moses took the tabernacle and he pitched it without the camp. Now, for time's sake, I'm not going to read all of these verses in between, but I'm going to ad-lib and just let you know that Moses set up a prayer area. The Bible says here in verses 7 through 8 that he set that tabernacle up outside the camp where the people could go and pray and commune with God and experience his presence. And if you read verses 7, 8, and 9, you will see that the pillar of cloud came down over the tabernacle door and abode there, and he did communicate with Moses and all of the people. They stood afar off, they observed that experience, and they then began to bow and to worship in their doors as they observed Moses in the presence of God. Now, keep in mind, had they been more cooperative, they could have had the opportunity to been able to share in the presence of God in a glorious, miraculous manner. But you know, that's what sin will do. It will cut you off or cause you to fall short from God's best, from being able to receive his best and walk in his best. And so Moses set that prayer area up outside the camp because God's presence was not among them. He said he wasn't going to be there. And so now listen to how Moses dealt with God in verses 11, because this is how you as the believer will have to come to God as well. You know, God makes us promises. I just went through 7 of them at the top of the lesson, those 7 promises. And sometimes things may look like, God, you're not honoring your word. You said in your word that you would do this and that and the other. And God, why aren't I seeing it? And let's see how Moses dealt with it and got the answer. And in verse 11, and the Lord spake unto Moses face to face as a man speaketh unto a friend, and he turned again unto the camp. But his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, the young man, he departed not. So Joshua stayed at the tabernacle outside the camp in the presence of God. And I don't blame him. And in verse 12, and Moses said unto the Lord, see, thou sayest unto me. Now Moses is saying to God, look, Lord, you said unto me, bring you this people up. And you have not let me know whom you will send with me. Yet you said, I know you by name, and you have also found grace in my sight. So Moses is bringing God to remembrance of what he said, which is what we are to do according to the book of Isaiah. He said, bring you me into remembrance of my word. And in verse 13, and he says, now therefore I pray you, if I have found grace in your sight, show me now thy way, that I may know you, and that I may find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people. So Moses was asking, look, God, show me that I got grace with you. Show me what it is you are wanting me to do. And that's a good prayer to take into the new year. God, show me what you want from me, expecting from me. How do you want me to do? How do you want me to look? But also show me that I have grace. That was important because we're going to read on that the demonstration of God's grace would be a demarcation. It will set a distinction upon them from all other people. And that's what the presence of God will do on your life. And so in verse 14, and he said, my presence shall go with thee, and I will give you rest. And he said unto him, if your presence go not with me, carry us not up in. So now remember back over here in verse 4, or in verse, let me see, and the angel, and he said, okay, and follow him. In verse 3, he said, remember, he told them that he was not going to go up with them. And so now Moses is saying unto him, if your presence will not go up with us, then take us not up from this place where they are. Moses knew the benefit and the value that would in having the presence of God. And he said unto him, don't even take us out of this place, Lord, if your presence is not going to be there. Whoa, I don't blame him. And in verse 16, for wherein shall it be known here that I and your people have found grace in your sight? Is it not in that you go with us? So shall we be separated, and I and your people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. So Moses was saying to him, this is how it's going to make us different from the other people that are in the land. Your presence being upon us will be a demarcation that will help us to stand out when we get into this new area. And I would say when we get into this new year, the presence of God will be that demarcation and distinction on your life between you and other people. So go into this new year seeking God and making sure you have His grace and His favor and His presence on your life. And in verse 17, and the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that you have spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. So God has repented from his thinking that he had back up here in verse 5 in chapter 33 of Exodus, when he told the people to take off their ornaments. In other words, he wanted them to humble themselves, to give up something, to sacrifice. They were on a type of a fast, if you would. And I know that at this time of year, a lot of churches are fasting and seeking God for direction. And that is right, because he said back here in verse 5, he says, now put off your ornaments from you, that I may know what to do unto thee. So he wanted them to humble themselves for a season until he could decide just how it is he wanted to handle them because of their rebelliousness and their rebellious nature. And so now we see here in verse 17 that Moses has successfully reached into the heart of God and has secured his presence and affirmed that his grace would be upon them when they go into this new place. And that's what I am seeking to endeavor to do in my focus here today in this lesson on the presence of God. Get with him in fasting and praying as Moses did, and plead and ask for his grace. God, give me the grace that I need to get the job done in this new year. And verse 18, and he said, and I beseech you. That word means I beg you. Show me your glory. And that's where I got the title of my lesson today, Show Me Your Glory. And we know, many of us who are seasoned saints in the Lord, that God went on to explain to Moses that no man could see his face and live. And so in verse 19, and he said, and I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you, and I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy upon whom I will show mercy. And boy, is that not true. Sometimes you see some things and people, you wonder how in the world are they getting away with that. But God's gifts and his callings are without repentance, as we see he is letting us know in this verse that he is sovereign. Those people demonstrated a need to be chastised earlier in the text around verse 5, so much so that God put them on a slight consecration. And so in verse 20, and he said, you cannot see my face, for there shall no man see my face and live. And verse 21, and the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me, and you shall stand upon a rock. And it shall come to pass, while my glory pass by thee, that I will put you in between a cliff of the rock, and will cover your eyes with my hand while I pass by. And in verse 23, and I will take my hand away, and you shall see my back parts. Whoa! But my face you cannot see. Oh my God. Just reading about this put me in awe that Moses even got to see that much of God and was able to live. People, get the presence of God as we go into this new year.